Okay, we review the history of Jewish law. This is like our 7th session already, and we talk about the Mishnah. So, last time I mentioned that the Mishnah was organized by Rabbi-ovadia Nasi. We mentioned the orders, the tractates, how it's structured. But even though it was very well organized as was possible from all the material that he had in front of him, there were some problems because you take this amount of literature and you put it together. There will be some repetitions. There will be some things that were dealt with different rabbis at different times. And as I said, up until recently, there were many people who believed that after he did the initial work of putting them all together, he edited again and again until every word is very refined, very meticulously chosen. But this is not the case. I'll give you an example of problems that we have with the Mishnah. There's a famous chapter in the Mishnah. I mean, famous is because it's studied very often in the yeshivot. The Masechet, the tractate, is Masechet Kiddushin. It deals with the laws of marriage. And it starts like this: האישה נקנית בשלוש דרכים וקונה את עצמה בשתי דרכים. נקנית בכסף, בשטר ובביאה, וקונה את עצמה בגט ובמיתת הבעל. It said this: a woman can be purchased in 3 ways, and she could purchase herself, meaning acquire herself, in 2 ways. The 3 ways in which she can be acquired is either by money, by a document, or by having relationships with the man. And the way she acquires herself is either through a divorce or when her husband dies. So, not getting into the details of this whole issue. This is the first chapter of the Mishnah. Aisha niknet, the woman is acquired. Then the second chapter of the same tractate of the same Masechet starts with the word Ha'ish mekadesh bo uvishloho. A man can offer kiddushin, which means to sanctify, right, for marriage. He could either do it himself or through a messenger. And now the Talmud, which is the commentary on the Mishnah, starts a discussion that goes for like 2 or 3 pages of why is it that the first chapter uses the term to acquire, and the second chapter uses the term to sanctify. Ha'isha niknet, and then ha'ish mekadesh. Should have been ha'isha niknet, ha'ish koneh, or ha'isha mitkadeshet, ha'ish mitkadesh. A woman is sanctified, the man sanctifies, etc. Or a woman is acquired and a man acquires. So, the answer to that is what I said before. If you look at the full structure of the Mishnah, and that's why in the past people used to study before they would approach the Talmud. The way in many yeshivot people say today, they start one section of the Mishnah and then go to the commentary right away. But originally, the method of learning, especially in the Sephardic yeshivot, was comprehensive. First of all, you had to know the whole Tanakh. The whole Tanakh, not only the Torah and everything Tuvim, you had to know it thoroughly, to know the Hebrew, to know the mindset. Then you had to know the whole Mishnah. All the Mishnah, the whole 6 orders with all the details. Why is that? It's not only to know the themes and the topics, but also to have fluency. It's fluency of the language and the landscape, that you start thinking in the method of the Mishnah. And then if you have a question, instead of trying to come up to invent an answer, you first go through the layers of the text that's in front of you. So if you read the whole Mishnah, the whole tractate of Kiddushin, you'll find something very interesting, which is that the first chapter starts with a Mishnah that speaks about marriage, Aisha niknet b'shalosh drachim, but then has nothing to do with marriage. If you read the whole chapter, I'm not going to read the whole chapter, it has the first couple of words of each one of them. So the first Mishnah speaks about the acquisition of a woman. That's how it was viewed at the time. That is a sort of an exchange, that the husband acquires the woman. Today, we like to believe that we're modern. We don't think that way, right? We have equality, and I'm a proponent of equality. but still the mindset is the same. Think about that. You never, I mean, if it's a couple that marries at a young age and they still respect the parents, the man will ask the father of the bride for his daughter's hands in marriage. Why? If you have equality, just decided, actually, this is what I did when I got married. My wife and I, we decided, and then we told our parents. So it was just like a formal thing. And also, we don't appreciate, or it's frowned upon, when the woman courts the men, right? I just had a couple, we're talking about marriage, and I asked them, how did you meet each other? And they're like, yeah, we knew each other for years, and then we reconnected. I says, how did you reconnect? Who called who? They're like, we don't remember. I says, are you sure you don't remember? And then the girl says, I called him. She's embarrassed to say that she called him because he has to court her. He has to call her, and he has to give her the ring. Even though you exchange a ring, they always expect him to give the gift and the wedding ring, the proposal. Imagine if you know how many proposals you know that the woman is the one who proposes to the man. So we are still locked with this mentality. We just don't use the word acquisition. But the Mishnah had a little less inhibitions of using that word, and they use that. But that's the first Mishnah. The second one speaks about the acquisition of a Hebrew slave. Third Mishnah, the acquisition of a non-Jewish slave. Fourth Mishnah is about the acquisition of animals. Fifth Mishnah is about the acquisition of non-living property and real estate. So, what is the first chapter about? It's not about marriage. It's about acquisitions. It just happens to start with acquisition for marriage, because this is the highest form. When you think about, if you go from top to bottom, that's if you go from bottom to top, the acquisition where there's the object purchased has the least interest in the purchase is when you buy inanimate object. The table or the field doesn't know that I'm buying it. It has no impact on the table. Then you go to animals. Animals are living creatures, so they don't understand in a sense who's the owner, but they have some, after a while they develop a relationship. Like the Navi says, Yeshayahu Navi says, Yada' shor konehu v'hamor evuz be'alav Yisrael lo yada' amilo itbanan. It says the ox, even an ox knows who its owner is. The donkey doesn't know who the owner is, but he knows where to find food. He knows who gives him food. It's like some kind of understanding. Not to talk about dogs that are really connected to their masters. But, so that's the next level. The higher level is Evet Knaani, Evet Ivri, slaves which are purchased, and they are aware of it, but they have a different type of commitment towards the master. And then a woman that we just call it acquisition, but in reality, it's a mutual relationship. But the Mishnah starts from the top, the highest form of acquisition, then goes all the way down, and then it concludes with this. It speaks about certain commandments, and ends. This chapter ends with this: Kol ha'oseh mitzvah achat metivin lo u'ma'arichin lo et yamav v'nochel et haaretz. Whoever does even one mitzvah will get great reward and will inherit the land. Kol sheishnu b'mikra v'mishnah v'derech eretz lo b'mera u'choteh. And if you study Torah and Mishnah and you have a profession and you work, you're protected from sin. Now, we see two things from here that teach us about the structure of the Mishnah. First, that when Rabbi Yehuda Nasi organized the Mishnayot, he worked in the form that we work today, even with modern technology. One of the ways that we work in order to organize material is to put labels. The classic DOS system and then Windows and Apple, with all the icons that we have today, still they use the same graphic or visual way that we organize our office, right? Directories and files. Only that when you just start with the MS DOS, you had to type copy file A call in to directory but today you drag the file, you put in directory. So in order and how do you identify material, like in the internet, you want to retrieve a file, you put tags. What's in this file? Even a YouTube video. When you look for a certain YouTube video, how do you find it quickly? Because it was tagged. It's a song, Israeli music from the 60s, whatever. They put all these tags, so you could easily find it. So he sorts all these files that he has in front of him, and he puts labels. Shabbat, divorce, marriage, etc., etc. And then, I have 2 files with the label marriage on them. One is really all about marriage. That's the 2nd and 3rd chapter of the tractate of marriages. And one happens to have the first Mishnah deals with marriage. Now, Rabbi Ovadia, the author, has 2 options. He could clip, he could cut the top of the Mishnah. Okay, so the rest has to do with acquisitions. I'll put it in the tractate that deals with economic transaction, finances, and all that. And I'll just clip the top and I'll put it here. Or you could put the whole chapter in. He chose the second option. How do we know that? I mean, we know that we chose it because of the difficulties that I've shown, but also because it ends with this statement about he who studies this and that will inherit the land, right? A nice concept. This is like, it's similar to what we have at the end of a class. It's very common if you, on Shabbat, usually the rabbi will give a class, goes on like for 40 minutes, an hour. But at the end, it will not end with a nice story or with a statement. If we do this, we may inherit, see the Mashiach. You like to end with a nice story, right? You don't end with a dry law or with a negative concept, right? But it's called Divrei Agada. So the same thing here. Since the original file, the first chapter of Masechet Kiddushim was only 1 chapter, it ended with this nice concept. When it was combined with other chapters, you see this anomaly that in the middle of the Masechet, at the end of chapter 1, there's this sort of finale. It appears in the middle. Now, why did Rabbi Ovadia say clip the Mishnayot? Because as we mentioned previously, when you try to recall something that you know by heart, it's hard to separate. You already have a sequence of memory. And since those files were memorized way before Rabbi Ovadia wrote the Mishnah, he was afraid that if he clips it, if he cuts part of it, people would forget the rest. So he left things in the Mishnah as they were recited orally for hundreds of years or for decades. An example for that is that when you study Mishnayot, you'll see that sometimes the Mishnah goes off, what we think is it goes off on a tangent. You start with one thing, and then you end you end in a completely different place. For example,
that's part of the codification that he did. He also codified.
No, he codified it. I mean, he codified it, legalized. But if you wanted to be easy to remember, right? You would think, let's organize all by themes. All the laws of Megillah, all the laws, let's say of Purim, should be in one place, and there shouldn't be anything that doesn't belong there, right? Okay, I'll give you an example of organizing that. You can go to a supermarket, and let's say you need stuff for making coffee in the morning. Now the milk is in one section, coffee is in another section, and sugar is in another section, right? Or you want to have a picnic, so go get the buns from one side of the supermarket. Especially in America, some places you need the golf carts to go from one side of the supermarket to the other. It's huge. And then you get the condiments and get the hot dogs, right? You have to go all over. And then you have some supermarkets who say, you know what? We have each one in its proper place, but you could also find in one section, you'll find next to the hot dogs, you'll find ketchup and mustard and buns and even coals that you could put everything together. So, and at home, same thing. Some houses you'll go and they say, you want to make coffee, go make for yourself. You open that, you find everything in one place. Other places, they have their own organizational system. So now, the same thing with text. I could say, okay, all the laws of Megillah, I'll put here. All the laws of this, I'll put here. Or you say, since I'm used to learning them together, I'll keep them as a bunch. And Rabbi Hanasi, because everything was oral, he says, I'll keep it as a bunch. And it's an example. The Mishnah in Masechet Megillah, it talks about the laws of Purim. And part of the discussion is the 2 months of Adar. Adar Rishon, Adar Sheni. We know that Adar Rishon is it's the additional month. So when we have 2 months of Adar, we celebrate Purim on the 2nd month. So the Mishnah says, En ben Adar Rishon le Adar Sheni ela. The only difference between the 1st month and the 2nd month is this. Good. So now we should continue with the laws of Purim. No, instead, the Mishnah goes on with a whole list of laws that start with the word En ben ela. En ben Yom Tov le Shabbat ela ochel nefesh bilvad. The only, just like the Mishnah says, the only difference between the 1st Adar and the 2nd Adar is that. Then, the only difference between Yom Tov and Shabbat is that you can cook. The only difference between Shabbat and Yom Kippur is the punishment. The only difference between Sefer Torah and Tefillin is the level of sanctity, etc., etc. Now, all these are like 20 laws. Have nothing to do with Purim. Why are they there? Because once you say En Ben, the only difference is this, you had the whole list. That's how you organized it. So that also created a problem, which we'll see later on, when you write a commentary on that, just like the original problem when we took all the laws from the Torah, and there were scattered laws. Now you come to write the commentary on that, and it starts spreading and spreading in new directions, and then the future generation will have to sit and say, okay, it's about time to take all this material and reorganize it. So the whole story of Jewish law is this: commentary, expansion, reorganization. And in the process, here, this is still flexible. They are not, even though they made final laws, there was still some flexibility to comment on and expand, but later on it became more, everyone who made a decision sort of became final, and we'll talk about it next time, Be'ezrat Hashem.